DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome into the DSPN. My name is Lachlan Waugh. I have been hosting this podcast this week, typically producing it behind the scenes over here, over there. No Martin Devlin this week. He's away on holiday, lying on sun lounges on beaches in Queensland, while the rest of us carry the workload. We're used to it. I'm only kidding, of course. And we welcome in a good friend, Zane The Warriorholic. Big Warriors fan since they were established in 95. Zane, welcome into the podcast. Thank you very much.
Yes, Lachlan, good to have a sane person on the other side of the mic for once.
It's rare. It's very rare.
I wouldn't say much about this side of the microphone, though.
Oh, no. Be nice to yourself. Let's start off with the Warriors, your team, of course. This is a side that I think it's fair to say. Now, I'm a Broncos fan, and I like to think I'm objective with this team. I was giving them a little bit of stick early in the season. I've matured a bit over the last few weeks, and I have given them their props. This team just keeps on winning, and all that matters in this competition is that you get 2 points, you win games, but you do it sort of in a clean manner, high completion rate, good defence, you don't fall off tackles. The opposite of what my Broncos are doing right now, but the Warriors keep on winning, and that Souths win was another example of a team who are well coached, well drilled, they seem to play for each other, and they can score points when they need to. Defensively, a bit to be desired, but at the end of the day, it is 2 points. Your thoughts on that victory?
Yeah, the defensive side of thing, I think, is you've got to give a lot of credit to Latrell. That guy's a freak. A couple of those tries that he put on, I don't think anyone defends them. So I'll take that as a little bit of a grain of salt. I think for the most part we defended everything else they threw against us. Probably should have taken a couple of his bombs without letting them bounce as well. But overall, it's just it's interesting to just grind out these wins every week, and you've always got these concerns about we need a little bit more of this and a bit more of that, but I've always said the only stat that counts is the 2 points.
Your thoughts on the Mitch Barnett injury? It's obviously a big loss because he's been huge for this team, and the way his game has gone up a level it feels every single year he's been at the Warriors. You know, a big loss, obviously. He's an origin player. At the same time, there's some pretty good cattle, particularly in the forwards, the depth of this team, and there's a really good next man up mentality. I talked about this with Kempe earlier in the week, and Andrew Webster talks about it a lot in his media stand-ups, that whoever comes in and has a job to do, they do it very, very well. And you've got Jackson Ford starting there against the Sharks this weekend. As much as Barnett's a big loss, I would imagine that it's one that from a certain perspective you guys can cope with.
Yeah, you go back to 2023 and we're constantly living with nightmares that if AFB was out, if Tohu was out, one or two players were out, we just couldn't hold that middle when they weren't out there. And it's probably a reflection, Dimitrick's in his third season now. Lecker's really stepped up. You've got guys like Jacob Laban. Jackson Ford has been a revelation in the middle. Aaron Clark, that was spread the workload a lot better. I mean, at the start of the season, everyone's biggest concern was how did the Warriors go about getting metres and post-contact metres with our AFB, who was running for 170-odd metres every week. And Mitch Barnett, last year, he was playing, 70-odd minutes. But we've spread the workload a lot better this year, and I think Jackson Ford has developed into quite possibly the best impact bench middle in the game at the moment with the metres he's able to deliver. He's not an intimidating player, but he just never stops. But then you've got, Dimitrick coming on there and monstering guys, 5 or 10 years as senior, offloading with ease and control. So it's a very different unit, and the balance is really exciting to see.
Yeah, I want to give a bit of love to Jackson Ford because I was a big critic of his, at least last year. I remember watching the first few games through the season. Obviously, 2024 wasn't a great year for the Warriors, but through the first maybe 3 or 4 games, I remember him making a couple of mistakes. There was a few boneheaded plays on attack in particular, and I thought, geez, the Warriors fans rate this guy a bit too much. But since then, he's been a pretty good operator in a quiet manner as well. And I think what you're saying there about him being such an impact and one of the best in the comp off the bench, yeah, I'd have to agree. It's kind of almost come out of nowhere in a sense.
Yeah, I've always been a fan since I think the first game against the Knights in 2023. So where the heck did this guy come from? And I feel like, by simpling his role and putting him in the middle where you just point him forward and tell him to keep going, it really suits him. And fans are it's funny, like you get a perception about a player and it's very hard to shake off. So traditionally he did have a lot of errors in him. He had a lot of stupid penalties, but I think he's only had 3 errors in the entire season this year, something like 3 or 4. he hasn't had an error in over a month. But fans don't start to call that out.
Yeah.
And Jazz Tavanga was another one. He had 9 total errors in 2024, but was constantly, paid out because he's the guy who got the errors. So I think he's done a great job to get those out of his game. And I think with a couple of the players that Webby's let go over the past couple of years, they are guys who have silly errors in them. And it's the only reason I can consider that he doesn't play MGT, Myla Graham Tolfa, in the centres, because he has that odd brain explosion error in him. So I think it's, leading the completion rate in the comp is a sign that it's something we're focusing on.
Yeah. How does this year, as a fan overall, this 2025 season, look, the club's 9-3, it's a great start. By the numbers, you're on track to go 18-6. Whether that happens is another question. But it's a pretty workable draw, I think it's fair to say, for the Warriors. But you look at it this year and you compare it to, say, 2023, which this year feels a bit out of the blue. That felt very out of the blue, first year for Webby as the coach. How do the years differ as a fan? What makes them different? Or are they actually incredibly similar in your eyes?
Not really. I think in 2023 you had a bunch of players who'd already been there. They brought in a couple of guys. A lot of it was reliant on every player having their best season that they'd ever played in footy.
Yeah.
And we had some genuine, world-class players in the likes of AFB and Tohu, Shaun Johnson and the like. Whereas this year I feel like it's a genuine team effort. It reminds me of the early days of the Panthers when they started to come to fruition. That every man knows his job. They've all bought into the culture, and I feel like a couple of players moving on from last year who are big personalities have kind of helped that. You've got a guy like Fish who's come in, who's got a huge presence, but he doesn't have that big personality that's really going to have huge waves of emotion and the ups and downs, which we've kind
he
of
seems
had
to be
in the past.
quite a quiet character, actually, Fisher Harris, more so than I realised.
Yeah, I think that's half the reason they had 2 captains, right? Because you can see he clearly doesn't like doing the post-match interviews. But I just feel like it's that you can just see the camaraderie. And I think we had that through most of 2023. But once things started to go a little bit awry in 2024, that's when you could see, fingers being pointed at each other literally on the field, guys shouting at each other. But we haven't seen that this season. So what probably would summarise this is I feel like it's only the beginning. That you see we're winning the New South Wales Cup. Our Jersey Flegger win out of the 8 now. You had Harold Matts winning, and their games, so many of them were won in a similar manner where it's sticking in the fight, it's being able to trust the processes. They came back and won about 3 or 4 games in the last minute. Jersey Flegg did that the other week. So it's a real culture of just playing for 80, playing for your mates, high completion. And I think that's sustainable, whereas in 2023 it was very much reliant on 2 or 3 guys that we've already mentioned being out there every week and pulling out the magic.
Zane The Warriorholic with us. Last question about the Warriors, and then we're going to do a nice mid-year report for the NRL, because Zane, we both played professional rugby league and we've both coached it, so of course there's no one better in this world to judge the NRL right now than us. Am I right when I say that?
Obviously, man. I think we're both alien contenders.
Exactly. Or at least in our own books or in our own dreams. But last one on the Warriors. A lot was made of the roster going into the season. A lot of experienced players, key players leaving. Shaun Johnson, of course, and Tohu Harris retiring. Adam Fanua-Blake leaving. Did we overrate those departures a little bit much? Adam Fanua-Blake, of course, had a big year last year, but Shaun was well off the pace compared to his 2023. Tohu Harris, it just felt like the body was really starting to let him down. Did we kind of overrate those guys and their departures a little bit too much, which then in turn meant that, say, someone like me who sort of looks at the Warriors a little bit more impartially, looked at that roster and thought, I just don't see how they make the top 8? Is that a fair comment to make?
I feel like it was the experience that we lost. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was like 1,000 games of experience we lost, and you add Dylan Walker to the mix there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That concerned me. It's like, you can have talent and you can have all the drive, but it's the experience to deal with adversity, in which we've seen Lecker, Dimitrik, Jacob Laban, Tanner Stower-Smith when he came in, I'm going to say Ian Healy, Sam Healy, who've played with a level of calmness and control that's beyond their actual, their number of games they've played. That was what concerned me most. And as you say, there were concerns about AFB's influence off the field. SJ, struggling with that knee or the Achilles, which meant he wasn't able to take the ball to the line, which really impacted our shape. So there were all these concerns around them. Tohu with more bandages than a dummy. But it was the experience that worried me, and I feel like they've somehow managed to bridge that gap very, very quickly.
I'm looking at the Warriors' schedule here. You got the Sharks next, then you got the Panthers, and you got my Broncos. That's a win right there. We may as well forfeit. And then the Tigers after that. I like to sort of group things into blocks of 4, because after that Tigers game, with the Knights, that's pretty much a win. The Titans should be a win. The Dolphins, that'll be a win. And then you got the Dogs after that, but that's a little while away. That's in August. So the next 4, Sharks, Panthers, Broncos, Tigers. What is the Warriors' record through those 4?
I've always said that we get through the Sharks over there, and there's no reason we can't beat those other guys. So I had a block of 5 games before the bye, this bye coming up, that I wanted to win 3.
Yeah, because there's a week off after this weekend. They've obviously got the bye, and then they've got the Panthers,
So we're already there. If we beat the Sharks, we're 2 points ahead of that. And then I only had us having to win 5 out of our last 9 to be right on the fringe of the top 4. I think right now we could potentially win 6 of those and get into the top 4, have that home semi. No one's going to want to come and play us. And I feel like the thing that gives me the most hope is Gus Gould said in an interview maybe about a month or so ago, he'd spoken to players from 2 different clubs, and he'd asked them who are the toughest team to play, and they said by far the Warriors, just by the way they're defending, by the way they give you nothing, they're relentless through the middle.
Wow.
The fatigue they create. So hearing that from someone who's got no reason to talk us up whatsoever excites me, and I think that the Dogs, what happens to them with Galvin, and if they end up like Sexton walks, what does that do to a culture at this time of the year? It either galvanises them, no pun intended,
come on,
or they turn to shit. Took you a while, didn't it?
Yeah.
So I think we can beat them this time, and if we beat the Dogs, then I think it's probably the Storm as our main mental block. We haven't beaten them in about 45 years, so I just hope we don't play them in the final.
Yeah. Well, again, it just feels very wide open, Zane, and the Warriors, finishing in the top 4 and even managing to get through to the preliminary finals and, geez, maybe further. As much as I wouldn't have seen it coming at all pre-season, I'm sure many wouldn't have. I'm sure many Warriors fans, diehards deep down, knew that probably wasn't going to be the case. It could well be the case. It's that sort of year. The NRL tosses up these years. Last year felt a bit like this as well, where a lot of teams fell out of the 8 that I don't think anyone really expected to. This year could be very much the same. There's nothing really to suggest that the Warriors, based on how they're playing, can't be in the top 4 and even then get to the grand final. And I think it's a very fair thing to say. All right.
I'll be wearing this, mate. Look at that.
Oh.
The 2011 grand final t-shirt. I'm looking forward to getting the 2025 grand final t-shirt.
Okay, I'm happy to compliment you guys, but I don't want to see that on my screen, please. Thank you, Zane. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Appreciate
it, brother. But just a quick point before we get off this. Every time we talk, and I post this on my social media, everyone's going, that guy Lachlan's a wanker. Why does he hate the Warriors? I love the fact that you've stuck with your team. It's the Broncos.
Yeah.
And a lot of, I had many NRL teams that I followed over the years, but I quickly patched the Warriors. The fact you've stuck with your team, good on you, mate. So it's not that you hate the Warriors. You just back the Broncos, I hate the Broncos with as much passion as you hate the Warriors.
That's fair. That's fair. No, I've been supporting Brisbane since I think it was 2008, and I've never looked back. And I went to that grand final in 2015, and it hurt. And I won't lie, the eyes got glassy, and there's been some pretty torrid years. I mean, the Anthony Griffin years weren't great. The years of Seabold and the early stages of Kevin Walters weren't great at all. They're my team, and you can relate to this, Zane. You love the Warriors. Exactly. They are your team, and you're never ditching them, okay? It's this toxic relationship you get yourselves into. And as much as the Broncos are pissing me off right now, and I'm the first to call out how poor they've been playing, it's because I love them. And they're going to be my, that's the child that's failing at school, and they're bloody committing crimes, but you still love them, It's that kind of thing.
I'll make you a Brolic t-shirt if you make the finals.
I'll be waiting for it. I'll be by the letterbox. When we sneak into the top 8 with 10 wins, somehow we get in there. I'm waiting for that t-shirt. Thank you, Zane.
Here's my brother. Talk again soon.
DSPN.